In the heart of the Igbo village of Umuofia, there stood a great forest filled with giant trees. These were no ordinary trees. They were as tall as mountains, their branches touching the sky. The villagers believed the trees were older than time itself. Every night, when the moon shone brightly, the trees would whisper to the villagers. Some said they spoke of the past, others said they warned of the future. But no one knew why they spoke or who they were speaking to. Nyameka, a young boy with bright eyes and a curious heart, always listened to the trees from his hut. He wanted to understand their whispers. Were they telling secrets? Were they warning the people? One night, he decided to step closer to the forest. His heart beating fast. As he neared the trees, their whispers grew louder, sending chills down his spine. Nyameka ran back home and told his grandmother, Mama Uche, what he had done. She shook her head and pulled him close. The trees are ancient spirits, she whispered. They remember everything that has ever happened in Umuofia. They speak, but only those who listen with a pure heart can understand them. Nyameka's eyes widened. Then I must have a pure heart, he exclaimed. But Mama Uche only sighed. That night, the elders of Umuofia gathered in the village square. The trees had been whispering more than usual, and it made the elders uneasy. Something is coming, said Elder Obi. His voice heavy with worry. The trees never speak this much unless a great change is near. The villagers exchanged nervous glances. What could it be? The next evening, Nyameka returned to the edge of the forest. This time, he wasn't alone. A shadow moved between the trees, and Nyameka froze. Who's there? He called out. Slowly, a tall figure stepped forward. He wore a long robe made of leaves, and his eyes glowed like fireflies. You can hear them too, the stranger asked. Nyameka swallowed hard. Yes. Who are you? The stranger knelt before Nyameka. I am the keeper of the trees, he said. I protect the voices of the forest. Nyameka's heart pounded. Why do the trees speak? He asked. The keeper smiled. Because they have stories to tell. And one of those stories is about you. Nyameka's hands trembled. Me? But I'm just a boy. The keeper placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Long ago, your ancestors made a promise to the trees. But that promise has been forgotten. The trees whispered to remind the villagers before it is too late. Nyameka's head spun. What promise had they forgotten? The keeper led Nyameka deeper into the forest. They walked for what felt like hours until they reached a cave hidden beneath the roots of the oldest tree. Inside lies the truth, the keeper said. Nyameka hesitated, but his curiosity pushed him forward. He stepped into the cave. And what he saw made his mouth drop open in awe. The walls of the cave were covered in carvings, stories etched into stone. Nyameka ran his fingers over them, tracing the shapes of warriors, elders, and the giant trees. These are the stories of our people, the keeper explained. The trees remember everything. They whisper so we do not forget. One carving showed a great gathering of villagers. They stood before the trees, hands raised in an oath. What are they promising? Nyameka asked. The keeper's voice was solemn. To protect the trees. To never cut them down. To always listen to their wisdom. Nyameka felt a cold shiver. But the villagers, they have started cutting trees for firewood. The keeper nodded. That is why the whispers have grown louder. The trees are warning the village. If they break the promise, they will bring darkness upon themselves. Nyameka's heart raced. He had to tell the elders. Nyameka ran to the elders and told them what he had learned. Elder Obi frowned. A boy claims to speak with a forest spirit, he scoffed. Impossible. But Mama Uche stepped forward. I believe him. The trees have always guided us. We must listen. That night, the first sign of trouble arrived. The river, once clear and fresh, turned murky and dark. The villagers whispered in fear. The trees are angry, Mama Uche said. We must act before it is too late. The next morning, the village gathered under the biggest tree in the forest. We must decide, said Elder Obi. Shall we listen to the trees or continue as we are? Nyameka stepped forward, his voice strong. If we do not listen, we will lose everything. The very next day, the sky darkened in the middle of the afternoon. A strong wind howled through the village, shaking the trees violently. It is another warning, Mama Uche whispered. The spirits of the forest are restless. Nyameka returned to the forest and found the keeper waiting. The trees grow weak, the keeper said. Their voices will soon fade if the villagers do not stop. Nyameka clenched his fist. I will make them listen. That night, a great branch from the oldest tree cracked and fell in the village square. The villagers gasped in fear. This has never happened before, one elder cried. The trees are truly angry. Desperate for answers, the elders decided to visit the Oracle of the Hills. They took Nyameka with them. The oracle's cave was dark and filled with strange symbols. You have awakened the past, she said. But will you heed its message? The oracle told them of an ancient curse. If the trees are destroyed, the village will fall into ruin. The land will dry, and the river will vanish. The elders shuddered. What must we do? Elder Obi asked. The oracle's eyes glowed. Fulfill the forgotten promise. Back in the village, the elders called another meeting. We must choose, Elder Obi said. Continue cutting the trees and bring ruin, or honor the promise and save our village. The villagers looked at each other in silence, knowing the weight of their decision. After much debate, the villagers agreed to stop cutting the trees for firewood. Instead, they gathered fallen branches for use. It was a small step, but Nyameka felt hope stir in his heart. That night, the whispers changed. They were no longer warnings but gentle songs carried by the wind. The villagers listened in awe. The trees are pleased, Mama Uche said, smiling. Days passed, and the once murky river began to clear. Fish returned, and the villagers rejoiced. The land is healing, cried Elder Obi. Perhaps there is still time to make things right. Nyameka met the keeper again, who handed him a small seed. This is the seed of wisdom, he said. Plant it in the heart of the village, and it will grow into a new guardian tree. The villagers gathered as Nyameka planted the seed in the village square. This tree will remind us of our promise, he said. As the seed took root, a new chapter for Umuofia began, one where the trees and villagers lived in harmony once more. Days passed, and the small seed Nyameka had planted began to sprout. The villagers watched in wonder as its roots spread deep into the earth. This is a sign, Mama Uche said. The trees have accepted our promise. One night, as the villagers gathered near the young tree, they heard the whispering voices once more. But this time, they were soft and filled with gratitude. You have remembered, the trees whispered. The balance is restored. The elders declared that from that day forward, no tree in the sacred forest would be harmed. Nyameka, now wiser from his journey, promised to teach future generations the importance of listening to the trees. To celebrate their renewed bond with the forest, the villagers held a grand festival. They danced under the moonlight, sang songs of their ancestors, and honored the trees that had protected them for generations. Years later, the small tree had grown tall and strong, its branches stretching towards the sky. Nyameka, now a young man, stood beneath it, listening to the soft whispers of the forest. He smiled, knowing that the trees would always speak to those willing to listen. The promise would never be forgotten again.